We'll do a little toast. I'll just go ahead and say, welcome, everybody. This is Spirituality, the show where my buddy and colleague Joanna and I just dish reality on some of the things that we go through as psychics and some of our viewpoints of things, all things spiritual. I am Kat. I am a longtime astral traveler and spirit consultant. And this is my good buddy, Joanna. I will let her introduce herself.
Hello, my name is Joanna, and I'm a hypnotherapist, I'm a medium, and a quantum channeler. And this is just a little cool chat with my friend, Kat.
Today, we were really hoping to talk a little bit about what it's like to grow up with, I'm going to put it in quotes, psychic abilities, or basically alternative views of realities when that kicks in at a really early age, and what kinds of things that can look like and feel like for people. I know myself personally, my abilities really kicked in very strongly around early adolescence, 11 or 12 years old. And was that also your experience, Joanna?
Yeah, the strongest was about 11, 12, and I had it before that.
Hmm.
Me being medium, when you're so little, you don't really understand because in my family it was like taboo. You don't talk about that stuff. And back then, we didn't have like, the YouTubes we have these days and just look up like, oh, I'm seeing a spirit. What does this mean? We didn't have that. And first is the fear, really, honestly, like the fear of the unknown and the anxiety of like, what the heck is this, right?
Right.
Um, yeah, how do you feel about it when you first start like seeing strange phenomena, strange things for you, Kat?
I think for me, there were also signs much earlier in childhood, but I think largely in young children, and you can tell me if this was your experience as well, that it largely in younger children, it gets kind of written off as normal childhood things that don't really get taken very seriously, even though the signs are there. And I don't know what that looked like for you. For me, I was highly intuitive, almost pre-cognizant. I had an incident when I was about 4 years old where I woke up and leapt out of bed and grabbed my little brother's foot right as he was falling out the window. Things like that, where I had very sharp intuition, almost on a precognitive level. But most people or most parents, most adults wrote that off as just lucky circumstances or, nothing like it ever really got noticed or taken seriously until there was an escalation of things in early adolescence. What types of things did when you were young, like what did some of the early signs look like for you?
The early signs was, as children, we're so intuitive, right? Just in general, like
Hmm.
me being a medium, just saying that, I didn't actually understand I was a medium until
Hmm.
later on. So some of the things I was going through is just the knowing. Like when I knew who to avoid as a child, I was like somebody like a relative came to me. I don't some relatives I was like, please don't come near me. And my mom, I was like, stay away. And even though they were act so nice, so sweet, like it's a knowing I had. My mom was like, and she kind of knew. It was like, yeah, she's right. Until later, like you were saying, like 10, 11, 12, then I was able to express it. Just give you an example. Just one of the most impactful moments I had is when I predicted my grandma's death. I was about 12, like something like that, 12, 13. It was a year and a half in advance. And I was on a three-way call with my girlfriends, back in the day. And it just came to me like the downloads, right? Just come. It's like a knowing. You just know it. And I'm like, oh my God, someone's gonna get sick. And they knew my abilities because we did like psychic tests and stuff, like games. And I just gave them the prediction that a year and a half in advance, my grandma's gonna get sick. I don't want to even say that out of my mouth. Like, and she was healthy. And then fast forward a year and a half in advance, she suddenly got sick and she passed away to the hour that I predicted. So it made me confused. Why did I know this information? I felt like I was cursed, honestly. So I went to my parents, but they weren't supportive. So I think it's so important we talk about this, right, Kat? That to support the children, like if a child comes to you and has feelings or intuition or senses, just listen to them. Maybe it's not. Maybe they're just like making up stuff. Sure, they're kids. They pretend, but be open enough to listen because they might be right. They might be super intuitive and psychic. How was your experience with that, Kat, when you were younger?
My abilities really began with astral travel, leaving my body. And it was certainly that in and of itself was a weird experience, but it was exciting enough that I wasn't, you know what I mean? I certainly didn't go and tell my parents or let anybody in on it at that time, but I still thought that it was really very cool. It wasn't until shortly after that I started having experiences very much with what people tend to nowadays call shadow people or sleep paralysis demons or stuff like that type of a personality construct. And of course, at the time, like you said, this would have been, it's before really much information was available on the internet. You can't just go on YouTube. It wasn't like, it's also not like it was back in the day where somebody could just take me to the local shaman for training, you know? Back in an earlier time, those types of abilities would have been recognized in a young person and would have been like, okay, well, you need to go to the local elder or whatever the tradition is for training to learn how to deal with these abilities. But obviously, growing up in a Western culture in America, we don't have the local shaman available. Um, so you're left to sort of have to figure things out for yourself. And I hid it for a long time, for as long as I could. I couldn't control my abilities at first. They were kind of running wild and running amok. I was out of my body 5, 6, 7 times a night. I was able to sense when there were other personalities, other entities in my presence, although I wasn't good at interacting with them or knowing what to do or even knowing what they were. Couldn't sense or tell energies apart at that time. There is a big skill set that goes with a lot of this. And I think you would agree that it takes some time to be able to say, all right, I can feel this is this kind of entity and this is this kind of personality. You can feel the difference. There is a vibrational difference, but there's a skill set that sort of goes along with being able to tell that difference and how to interact. And so it was a hard jump off the high dive with no water wings for me um in
Yeah.
that. And so definitely my dad never knew anything about it because he was an agnostic and would have gone and had me my dad absolutely would have had me taken to a head shrink and diagnosed and had me on medication faster than you can say high functioning schizophrenic for sure. um, I'm pleased and blessed and forever grateful to my mom that she didn't do that. She didn't even tell my dad. She just tried to help me through it as best. She was very understanding. She had spiritual smarts enough to know that I'm not crazy. There's something going on. But
Mhm.
as to what to do about it or where to go, I mean, she wasn't sure how to help me with this type of thing, and really nobody was. So it was a steep learning. It was a steep learning curve for that.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember, Kat. That is great you mentioned that because that learning curve, because when you're younger, you have no idea. There's like, you're just filtering through all this information and all this energies and trying to understand what is good, what is bad. And it took many years. It took like basically more than half of my life. I'm like 30, 37, 38. Sorry, I just turned 38. And
Mm-hmm.
for more than half of my life, I had to process how I was feeling. So when I get energies, they touch me, I see them, I smell them, all the sensations and beyond. And to actually the feeling and the knowing, it's like, okay, you start to feel in your body after so many times of, okay, this energy in my gut feels good. I feel good, good thoughts, good feelings, happy, just anything, any high vibrational feelings. And then the
Mm-hmm.
opposite of heavy and dense and just feel either the fear or they're scared, and that's a lower vibrational energy. And also the colors, I've noticed when I see, like, let's say a bright, like if a bright light like shines up next to somebody, I see that's an angel. They come in different forms. For me, either they're orbs or a bright light just shines, and that's a very high vibrational being. And they could be in the spirits as well, the spirits of realms that existed in here, meaning they were alive at one point, or they had never been actually incarnated in this earth, like angelics and different beings from other planets.
Mm-hmm.
And it took very long to understand. And even this is the most important people have to understand. Now, when you start to become more intuitive, we're all psychic, you filter the thoughts. So for me, the longest it took is this my thought? Am I making this up? Or is it a thought that I'm getting from, where's this thought coming from? And you have to really take your time and process. Is it coming from a higher frequency? Meaning, is it a positive thought? Is it serving me? Or is it a negative energy trying to tell me something that's actually gonna not serve me, because they do. They come and they trick you and all this stuff, but not trick you where you're actually gonna be harmed. They just want to play with your mind, honestly. So when you filter through, what are your thoughts? Because the best way to do is like you're in a neutral state. When you become a neutral state, like in meditation, when I do my readings and they come in, I'm absolutely neutral. There's no thoughts coming in and out. That's how I know it's not my thought. And I neutralize myself because I just remove my thoughts. I could do it instantly. And when you filter those thoughts, then you understand as to what energy is coming in and as to the information that's coming in. And that's super important to do. I think that's one of the most to understand.
I think it's important
Yeah.
too to bring up because not everybody's experience of life or thought processes or socializations are going to be exactly the same. So if you're dealing with a young person who is experiencing some type of phenomenon, like either you or I was, and feeling some kind of way about it, they may be, because our minds translate vibration in a way that makes sense to us personally, you may be getting different, you may be hearing different kinds of things. So someone else who sees a bright light like that may not necessarily interpret it as an angel because maybe they didn't get raised with angels, maybe they're not Christian, they don't believe in that sort of thing. So it may actually come through or feel like a different translation to them. It's important, like when you're dealing especially with young people who don't know what they're sensing or what they're feeling right off at the bat, that you keep an open mind about their socializations and their thought processes of how they're interpreting things because all vibration is going to get interpreted through them in a way that makes sense to them. So it could
Hmm.
sound like something very different. For me, I was actually most, I was initially actually most afraid of entities. Like you said, some of these entities that you deal with, in other, I don't know if you want to call it dimensions. I tend to think of it of other frequencies of reality, but some of them that you're going to deal with are, they were never human and they don't come from this planet. They don't come from our experience at all. And so when I was confronted with a vibration, another personality that I knew was a intelligent personality, but that had no human feeling to it at all, it's almost uncanny valley. It's like when when you look into someone's eyes and they feel soulless or there's no empathy response there because it's not a physical being. They don't understand pain or suffering or fear. They're not understanding why you're afraid. I almost was more afraid initially as a young person when I was interacting with personalities that did not resonate as human at all. So I almost initially felt like that was more scary because, the way I was raised, ain't no such thing. Do you know what I mean?
Same thing, Kat.
And
Same
I
thing.
think that that
And
gets interpreted by people in a lot of ways. I think this is sometimes how people feel like they've met something that feels evil when evil is not really a thing, but what you're coming up against is something that it just doesn't human. So it doesn't, right? That doesn't
it's true.
necessarily make
The
it evil.
unknown.
It just
Hmm.
doesn't feel human at all. But I think that
Yeah.
that can get from people's, if you grew up believing in evil or you believe in demons, or when you come across something that doesn't feel human at all, that easily translates in that mindset as evil. But I
Yeah.
think it's
That's a really good point.
different
Yeah,
people will interpret different energies in a different way depending.
that's a really good point, Kat, because even when I do like my hypnotherapy, I always ask the person about their beliefs. And your beliefs are so important because like you were mentioning, when I say high vibration or angelic, that's what I, say label them, or that's the way that I translate in my mind. It's so important too because, energy is energy. You're going to see like a bright light is bright light. They're going to see that, but how they translate into their minds is, in relation to how they feel. Now, children, right? Because we're talking about children. When I was a child, I really didn't know anything other than the information I was given. There's so many questions I had. And
Mhm.
so when all these kind of unusual phenomena happen, I think it's very important, for children, whatever culture that is, to be able to talk to somebody they trust. I had friends that I trusted. I was not able to talk to my parents. My mom actually took me to the doctors because I told her I had anxiety, and she knew about my gifts, but actually it was a secret. Now it's not. Hello, everybody. They know.
Yeah.
They already known for some time, but it was a secret in my family. But the thing I just want to state about children is to go to somebody that you trust. It could be friends that you can speak to this about because it needs to be talked about. You're not crazy. Even if you can't explain what you're seeing, even you think you're pretending it, it's good to talk about it with somebody. Just even online, right? You can get to these chat groups online and find a group that you can actually express yourself because it's vital. Number one is you're not crazy. I I thought I was crazy. Maybe Kat thought she was crazy, because we're seeing these things that we can't really explain. We just see it. And these
Mhm.
energies we feel and everything else. And now is a great time that you can go to these resources like us and hear our stories to know that you're not crazy and that is your experiences are validated, you know?
Yeah.
Um,
I was going to ask you about that. And I'm not to sound like I'm not trying to be controversial, obviously, and I'm not trying to say anything about people who are on medication for this type of thing. But do you think, and this is again, this just opinion pieces, right? But do you think that there is a section of people who get diagnosed as something like highly bipolar or as schizophrenic, and really it is just the development of psychic abilities and it's not a mental disorder? Like, what do you think about that,
Kat,
Joanna?
I have to agree because it's not, just you can't just take a case and go, this is how it is. It's a case per basis, basically, like case per case, right? That's all it is. So when you look at somebody, you have to understand what are they seeing, what is happening, and once they explain their story, then you can. I don't want to say the word diagnosed, and you go, okay, well, clearly, it gets misdiagnosed because many times somebody who's intuitive might get diagnosed as one of these, bipolar, different personalities, all this stuff and I would say actually half the time because I really thought like, who the heck am I talking to? And what am I hearing? Like I have voices in my head. Like what are these voices? These are not my thoughts. I'm not thinking this. So yeah, for a while
Yeah.
I thought I was crazy and I had anxiety. So I would say yes. And I think now's the time to really unravel all this stuff and to go first. Things that you have are valid, number one. So just, breathe through it and then talk to somebody about not a doctor per se, really, because you go to the doctor, he's probably most likely going to, prescribe your medication.
That's what I
Because
mean.
if you go to a spiritual, like let's say I'm a spiritual hypnotherapist, right? It's important to go to a holistic doctor or anybody like us, anybody in the spiritual realm to help you get another point of view. So tell me, Kat, like what are your thoughts on this?
I feel, like I said, I feel blessed every day that my mom never had me diagnosed or put on medication, because I feel like as somebody who experiences these things, I needed to learn how to differentiate. I needed to learn my natural defense mechanisms in my own mind of how to separate physical reality from non-physical reality, how to tell the difference in different kind of entities, and how to cope with and live a life with my special and unique viewpoint, my way of seeing reality and dealing with reality. And I feel strongly that if I had been placed on medication that simply suppressed my brain's normal function, that has suppressed frankly, my soul's journey in this life, then I would have been left defenseless had I stopped taking my medication for whatever reason.
Hmm.
Let's say I spent years having all of that suppressed, and then for whatever reason I lose my health insurance or whatever happens in life, and I don't have my meds anymore, or I forget to take them, or whatever happens. Suddenly you have all of the abilities that were always there, all of the energies that have been storing up all that time coming back, and you didn't have the opportunity to learn and grow with your abilities. So
Yeah,
I
no,
just
totally
I
get what
feel
you're
blessed
saying.
that I was never put on medication.
And I'm glad, Kat, I wasn't either. I had actually options. I had three options the doctor gave me because I actually went to the doctor because I had three options. One, medication, and that was an option. But my mom both agreed, going, no, 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 no. And second one is just talk therapy, and the third one was the actually the scanning my brain. But the most important thing to remember too is that about the medication, the suppression. There's other alternatives. They really go to like medication or no medication. There's herbs that you can even take to relax your mind, relax the stress. And there's so many others, countless of other ones you could take that are actually healthy, natural, just to relax you. When you're younger and you don't understand what's happening with you, and first of all, don't diagnose yourself as crazy. That's number one. Go to somebody like a spiritual person or a group or YouTube, anybody like that, and ask, is anybody else having these kind of symptoms? And what is what's happening to them, and just kind of find your group or a person that you could talk to who would understand, especially actually a group of people, right? That you could actually talk to. And once you find your people, you understand you're not the only one. Like when I was seeing this paranormal stuff, I was like, oh my God, am I the only one? Am I crazy? And when I found my group online years ago, they were saying, "Oh yeah, I see that too." I'm like, "You see it too?" And I was like, "Oh, thank God, like I'm not the only one, so I'm not crazy after all." And it was
Yeah.
like a relief.
Yeah.
I really recommend that for. I mean, that nowadays you can just find that everywhere online, right? Different
Mhm.
kind of groups.
I want
Hmm.
to make sure that I'm being clear, with everybody in the video is, obviously pay attention to the behaviors, right? Like if the behaviors are looking harmful or self-harm or anything like that. I mean, there are cases, obviously, I'm not saying don't go to a doctor if you feel like that's
Hmm.
necessary for the situation. I just want to be clear that I'm not
Yeah.
not trying to say that,
Yes.
obviously the level of the behavior can warrant it for sure to go have it checked out. And I think that especially in young people, you and I have talked a little bit before about, like, especially in the teenage years, how sometimes abilities like this can present themselves in something of delinquent behavior. And I know I definitely experienced that as a teenager. For me, just as a young person, knowing that there's really no such thing as death, that the soul is eternal, that there's a lot more going on here, that there's truths beyond the truth that they tell, all of that as a young person, it made me fairly uninterested in the consequences of anything and a little bit defiant of like human authority figures. You know what I mean? Like, whatever, you're my dad, I'm not impressed. I've met higher beings. I was
Yeah.
a little bit
Yeah.
of a delinquent as a teenager. I feel like it was a lot to process for a young person, right? Did you experience anything like that?
Yes, Kat. Absolutely. Because when you're not understood or not even supported, and you're just kind of blocked, especially my family was not open, then what do you do? Enough, you just get to a point of like, okay, I'm not being heard, I'm not being at least listened to. Even if just that alone made me rebel. And when I was yeah, around 11, 12 onward, I kind of just, my mom knows, I kind of ran away from home. I was like, peace, I'm out. And that was my experience that I had. So it's so
Do you
important to know
think
that,
that
like you mentioned. Well,
Do
hmm.
you think that there is like something about like having to face like existential fear at such a young age makes you a little bit fearless in physical reality?
Yeah,
Like, do you think that
yeah.
that's a part of it when you're so young and for you it's like you had to go through the like I see dead people, you know what I mean? Like having to face existential fear and you
Yeah,
have to overcome all that fear and it tends to make you a little fearless in physical reality as well. So I think maybe
yeah,
it just
absolutely.
you tend to
It
see
does.
some delinquent behaviors out of young people who go through stuff like this. I think it's another thing to kind of keep your eye on for, any
Exactly. And
parents or people out there.
yeah, delinquent, there's a difference, like you were saying, Kat, it's super important. Now, there's a difference of, are they harming themselves or harming somebody else? But it's also a sign that they're asking for help. Because there was a time where I actually wanted to harm myself because I had enough, really. But the guides and angels and spirits helped me understand. I was supported by the, if you want to call it, invisible realm more than a physical realm. And I want the, you know, h- children, adults, whoever's listening to this, that there is an invisible realm that always around you, especially when you have the challenge in most challenging times, and all you do is to call upon them. They're already there, and they will. It happened for me. I had to ask for it. And just to know that you are not alone, number one, okay? No matter what you're going through, even if you feel you don't have support, like I didn't, sorry, basically. And I got through it anyways, where, yeah, I was rebellious, but I had the fearlessness of knowing that there's clearly more to life, and there's the invisible realms that I'm just talking to. So yeah, I was exactly, Kat. I was fearless, but again, it's just a form of asking for help because they're confused, and just to listen to them and or get help. If it gets to that point, please, go get help. Point is, you have to go into the higher consciousness, meaning you have to kind of like extract yourself from the situation. How do you do that? Meditation, actually just tuning out of the situation, um, listening to music, so many forms, writing, I mean endless forms. You have to kind of rise up from the situation, and just all the expectations, all the opinions, all the thoughts that you have, just silence them, neutralize them, and just look at your situation, go, oh. And when you go from there, you could realize it's not as bad as you think, really. Because a lot of times we make it much worse than it really is, by all this judgment that we put on ourselves and our life situations.
I would also almost recommend for people who are, if you find yourself or a young person in your life, a friend or a child in your life going through something like this, it doesn't hurt to look up because you have a lot of different spiritual communities and things that are around probably in your area nowadays, right? We're not necessarily alone in the journey anymore. So, especially if somebody is first learning how to meditate in order to control their abilities or learning some of these practices, I would say it's very helpful to have somebody who is an elder, somebody who's done it a lot to help guide that process. For a long time, when I was young and going through this, I had a solid meditation practice when I was 11, 12 years old. That's how a lot of this got started. But I had a thing that happened is when I would meditate consistently, like my abilities went from 10 to like 140 with a consistent meditation practice, right? Because this is for opening the mind to receiving frequencies. And so before I really knew how to control my abilities, I didn't have any control myself over it. It was almost like I became afraid of my meditation practice and stopped doing it. I would go through periods of not doing it because it would suddenly be 140, like doors wide open. It might be helpful to find a practitioner to help people through how to control their abilities along with that type of a practice, at least initially.
Yeah, yeah.
If you are a young person who's out there who's going through this, or you have friends that you know are going through it, there's a million resources on YouTube. Reach out. Please talk to older people in your life. It's way better to be out with your abilities and having the conversations. There's a ton of videos and people on YouTube and resources available to you now for that type of thing.
Also, if you like our conversation, like, comment down below. If you have some ideas for our chats that we can do, definitely just comment down below any ideas, suggestions if you have that you'd like for us to talk about.
For sure. And if you grew up in early life with psychic abilities or things like this and you have similar experiences, drop a comment and let us know. I really appreciate always Joanna being here and chit chatting with me. Love our conversations and I love that we get this type of information out there. You can check her out at Mind Healing Guide. And what's the name of your other channel, Joanna? You want to plug yourself real fast for me?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So I started another channel talk about, the otherworldly things called Confessions of a Quantum Channeler. So I just kind of launched that basically, and I can't wait to be talking about this more. This is really great stuff. Thank you, Kat.
All right. Bye. We'll see you
Bye.
later.
Peace.